name's John Heenan. I'm going to host and look after anybody from this side of the pond. And as I said, Sandy is in Denver with Chuck, so she's going to look after you there. So Sandy, I'll hand it over to you to introduce Chuck. Away you go.
I'm Sandy Corrigan. Tom and I facilitate 3 to 5 clubs in Colorado and around the world. And I want to, as we start, remind everyone, please mute yourself unless you're speaking so that we don't get a lot of feedback. And we'd love to get to know you. So please put your name, contact information, the name of your business, anything you want to tell us in the chat box so that we can reach out and connect with one another. You can save the chat yourself and connect with other people in whatever country you're part of. And I do want to introduce Chuck this morning. I've known Chuck for over 10 years. We're still friends.
Yeah. Remarkable.
Workers. So I want to use a couple words to describe Chuck. Chuck is a lifelong learner. He is a curiosity seeker, and he is very loyal. And you're really in for a treat this morning. He's going to tell you a little bit about some of his failures and successes, because that's all part of business and life. And so we're really excited to be on this summit with you this morning, learning about how to get our brains back and help everybody else get theirs back. So I'm just going to let you take it away, Chuck.
Thank you, Sandy. Thanks so much for joining us this morning. We trust this will be an investment for you, not an expense. Looking forward to having this valuable 90 minutes with you to share what's coming out of my new book. Just a quick little bit about me. I grew up in a little town in Ohio with about 12,000 people in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by cornfields. And so farming is in my blood. And when I graduated from high school, I graduated at the bottom of my class. Not the bottom, but pretty close to the bottom. It was so bad that they had me in the principal's office the day of graduation, asking, it was like a Charlie Brown movie. I was looking at adults' knees and they were all going, wah, 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 wah. And they were talking about me in front of me as if I wasn't there. And they were deciding whether they should let me graduate. And I think the consensus was, if we don't let him graduate, we're going to have him for another year. So let's get him the heck out of here. So I graduated. It took me 19 years to get through college. I'm 8. And the reason for that, I thought I was stupid. And that's kind of what they thought too. Turns out I had ADHD. I'm left-handed. I'm right-brained. I'm ADHD, and I'm a lot dyslexic. I'm a little bit ADHD. And back then, they just thought when you had those sorts of things, they didn't know what those were. They just thought you were stupid. The only one of those they actually knew about was left-handed, and they didn't like that either. So that was my background, and I spent the first few years of my adult life wondering if I could ever get a job. I truly remember thinking about graduating from high school. Okay, I'm graduating. There's 520 kids in my graduating class, big class. And if there's 519 jobs, I'm going to be the one left standing with no job. I just know it. That's kind of where I started. So I joined the Army because I had a high school degree and I knew they had to take me. And in the Army, I kind of had this flukish thing where I started a little business and found out maybe I had something to contribute. And fast forward 30 plus years later, I've built 13 businesses now in 9 industries on 4 continents. And probably about 3 or 4 years ago, I found out it's something like 80% of all entrepreneurs are ADHD. So I'm in good company. So that's me. What we're going to talk about today is not things I made up in an ivory tower to try and sell things on the internet or in a book. It's all stuff I bled over. In my first book I wrote, this is not a book I wrote, this is a life I've lived. And that's really how I see everything we do. It's just, okay, this seems to work. This is stuff I've done. Let's keep going. And then I share it with other people, and then I write it down for other people, and then I talk about it. So I'm not an author, I'm not a speaker, I'm an entrepreneur who writes down what he's learned and talks about it. All right, so let's jump into this today. We're going to talk about, first of all, I'm so thankful for 3 to 5 Club. You won't learn a lot about that today, but a 3 to 5 Club is our core offering that allows us all to be humans together across the world. So you'll get little spatterings of that today, but this is going to be about this middle book. I've written 3 books now, and the one in the middle is my newest book. The one on the left is about how you get off the treadmill as an entrepreneur. The one on the far right is the sort of the manifesto on why work doesn't work and why it's broken. So that's the one on the right is the who, what, when, where, and how or why of the participation age. The one in the middle is the how. It's 12 tools on how we actually reframe work and make it work for people. So this one's now available on Amazon with the other three. And this is the one we're going to be focused on today. All right. If you want to connect with 3 to 5 Club or connect with anybody, John Heenan told a lie up front. He said he was in charge, but actually he's smart enough to give John McIver the email address. So if you want to connect with somebody in Europe, talk to email John McIver, and Megan Kaufman is going to put these things in the chat box for you as well. And then if in the US you want to talk to us, you just talk to grow@3to5.com. Rest of the world and anybody who's virtual and wants to be in an online 3 to 5 Club, get a hold of Sandy at 3to5club.com. And then we have a podcast that Sandy moderates called Get Off the Treadmill, the GOT podcast. And Megan's going to put that URL in the chat box for you as well. Okay, so let's get moving here. So, I just realized I'm doing this way. Here we go. This works better. Probably cleans up a lot of the mess. All right. So I want to, at the end of this, I'm going to share with you about 4 companies, but I want to give you a little primer up front to motivate you. Here's a 2-person company that went from $55,000. Well, there was one individual there in the 2-person company. The owner had another person who went from $55,000 to $125,000 in 1 year and tripled her production. After having been in this company for 15 years, all of a sudden she took off because the owner applied these principles. Here's another 2-person company that went from $185,000 a year in revenue, and it was in US dollars. And it was $35,000 a year was what the owner was taking home. It's in the 4 years later, it was a $4.5 million company. And she works 3 days a week, and she runs this company from 2,000 miles away now. And she did it by applying the principles we're going to talk about today. A 35-person company. This was actually a law firm. They were stuck at $9 million for 18 years, couldn't get past it. And they went to $25 million in about 3 years. And the owners who had never gotten any time off started actually taking a lot of time off. And then there's a 75,000 person company we'll talk about very quickly at the end of today. This is a company with 75,000 people. It's about the same size as Google, and it has no managers anywhere in the company. There's not a single manager amongst the 75,000 people, and they own 10% of the white goods market throughout the whole world. So how is this possible? Let's find out. I stole this term, the participation age. We were getting an award in one of my companies. It was a marketing, it was actually a branding company. And we were in Silicon Valley getting an award from a very large technology company for being their brand or their marketing company of the year globally. Great honor. And there I heard this guy from Wired magazine. He talked about the participation age. And that really struck me, because how do we name our ages? Think about how we name our ages. We got the Stone Age and the Bronze Age and the technology age and the digital age and the information age. And it's always about things. Every age we've ever named, we name it about things. This is the first time I'd heard somebody actually attempt to name an age we're in about people. And I love that, because that's really where we're at. We are in the participation age. And we're going to talk about how small and large companies have adopted all these participation age practices. All right, so what is the participation age? Well, the guy from Wired magazine said it was one thing. I think it's 2 things as I've developed this over the years. It was about 10, 12 years ago that I heard this. And by the way, there were presidential candidates in the US using this term, the participation age. And that's another reason I love this, is I didn't have to make it up. I just took it from an obscure lexicon, and we're making it a common knowledge. So 2 hallmarks of the participation age. Number 1 is participation. People want to build a great company together, not for you, but with you. In other words, they want to make meaning. They don't want to just make money anymore. They never did, but now they have the opportunity to, and they're going to leave companies where the company is just making money, and they're going to go find one where they can actually participate in building the great company together with you, not for you. Participation. And the second hallmark of the participation age is sharing. When we build that great company, people want to share in the rewards of having built it, not just financial. Yeah, that's part of it, but they want to share in the rewards of having made the decisions to build that company. They want shared recognition and shared rewards and incentives and profits, and they will go somewhere else where they can get that. And there are a lot of companies springing up all over the world where they're following these two ways of doing things. And again, if there's one of you or two of you or three of you, this is going to apply. And if there's 75,000 of you, it's going to apply. Great principles apply across the board. So there's 3 core practices. There's actually 12. We're going to talk about 3 of them, 3 of the core practices in the emerging work world of the participation age. Today, we're going to talk about the concept of leader, distributed decision-making teams or DDM teams, and two-step decision-making. Here's the 12 tools. So there are 12 that we've identified. There might be more. There might be a few more. And you might already be doing some of these. That's great. These are 12 things that we outline in the new book, Re-Humanizing the Workplace by Giving Everybody Their Brain Back. We're going to talk about a few of them today. And the principle here is that these 12 tools are designed to do specifically one major thing along with a lot of minor things. They're specifically designed to turn the hierarchy on its side. Most businesses, we inherited this thing from the factories called the factory system. And most companies in the world, I'd say 90+% of companies in the world are still running on what we call the factory system, a top-down hierarchy of managers, directors, supervisors, presidents, vice presidents. It's a command structure where information flows up the pyramid and decisions flow down the pyramid. So it's an up-down relationship. And these tools are created to specifically turn it on its side so that we are now no longer relying on an up-down model, but a side-by-side model where we're all in this together. We're getting information from the edges of the organization to the center rather than from the bottom to the top. And then information and decisions are flowing in all directions all the time. And you'll see how this is not chaos. This is actually much more orderly and much more effective to turn them on our side. So these 12 tools exist to do that. And this is the basis for rehumanizing the workplace. So let's talk about these 3. First of all, we have to decide whether we actually have to rehumanize the workplaces. It's interesting, guys. There's in the English language, there's a word called dehumanizing. Look it up in the dictionary. It exists. There is no word for rehumanizing, whether you spell it with a Z or whether you spell it with an S, like our motherland does. Neither way, there's no word for rehumanizing. You put that in there, it's going to say you misspelled something. I find that fascinating. It's okay to dehumanize, apparently. We got a word for that, but you can't rehumanize. Not going to do that. So we want to rehumanize everybody by giving their brain back. The assumption here is that they aren't humanized. So how, is it a problem? Well, I would suggest that it's all broken, and we go straight to the data to find out that the workplace is in fact dehumanized. We took this factory system model that they got from the military, which got it from slavery, and we continue to beat the drum on this top-down thing, which keeps people from making decisions. So it's all broken. How do we know it's broken? Here's some data. Gallup here in America, they do an international survey. It's not just national, every month to see what is employee engagement. And employees actually is spelled with 2 E's here in the US. I just misspelled that. My apologies. Engaged employees are around 30% every month. That means about 70% of people, it goes 28 to 32% every month. About 70% of people at work are just doing what they have to get by. We call it phoning it in. They're just phoning it in. They're just barely showing up. That is fundamentally broken. But wait, it gets worse. When I did this slide first time about a year ago, 2 years ago, it was 51% are looking for a new job before COVID. And I had somebody in the audience who runs a major recruiting firm, and they texted their people back at their office and said, hey, what's our statistics? And he raised his hand. He said, actually, we're seeing it's closer to 65% of people regularly have their resume out looking for something else to do. They're not happy. And by the way, it's the most motivated, best people who are doing this. The ones that you don't want, they don't have their resume out. But wait, it gets worse. This one's kind of sad. 86% of people, according to Harris, 86% of people would rather be doing something else. Only 14% of people have actually found something they love doing, their dream job. So this is fundamentally broken. The data shows us that there's a problem here. There's a dehumanized aspect to this, and work has become an unwelcome interruption in an otherwise great day. And that started with the factories. It did not exist with free people before that. It was not an unwelcome interruption, but now it is. So how, and I love this question. If your machine, if you had a machine working at 32%, would you just say, well, that's the way it is. What are you going to do? No, you would oil it. You'd take it apart. You'd put it back together. You'd do anything you could to get that machine to work. You'd hug it, anything you could, because it's expensive to replace the machine. And you would only replace it as a last resort. And yet with people, we say, well, that's just the way it is. Well, we're going to show you companies that have 100% engagement, who have 2 people, 25 people, 75,000 people. This is not the what has to be. This is simply the norm. So it's all broken. And I'd like to get some more information on that from you guys in a minute here. Here's Robert Kiyosaki's defeatist definition of an employee. You guys have probably heard this from his book. He says, this is basically the relationship between the employer and the employee. I will pay you only so much to keep you from leaving, and you will work only so hard as to not get fired. Now, some of you are probably sitting and thinking, yep, I just saw somebody's face flash in front of me at work. This is broken. I pay as little as possible, and the employee says I work as little as possible. So I want to get your thoughts on this. I'm going to stop this slideshow because, by the way, we're going to participate today. We're going to be participative. This is not a lecture, even though it might sound like one already. I want you guys to chime in. And the best way to do this is you can hit your space bar and just start talking after you hit your space bar. You don't even have to unmute. Just hit your space bar, and most computers that'll work. Or you can type something into the chat. So the question here is, why is this the case? Why are people phoning it in at work? Why are they working only so hard as to not get fired? There's multiple reasons for this, but what do you think? Why are people working only so hard as to not get fired?
It's the culture in a lot of places, I find. It's just the way it is. And people they tend to do as little as they can. Because they're not given any other incentive, they're not given any other reason. They just turn up and they work and they go home, and their life, they get on with their life at the weekend and do whatever they do, but they don't see job as part of their life.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Chuck, we got a couple of people that said bad leadership. They're bored. They don't like what they do. They have lack of clarity on what they need to do. Yeah. No proper motivation, need inspiration, more responsibility for employees, no purpose.
Yeah, they don't have a plan. I saw that one as well. They don't have a plan. Micromanaged. Holy cow, there it is twice. That's great. 2 people in a row. They are micromanaged and don't feel appreciated. Yeah, these are all reasons why people feel dehumanized at work. Brian says, I don't think employees are asked enough to be involved. They don't fit into the process. Brian, I think you get the Cupid doll on this one, whatever a Cupid doll is. Because this to me is the fundamental issue. Let me go back to the slides here. I really think this is the big one. They're not asked. They're not brought into the conversation. So we intuitively know it's broken. And here's data. This is stunning. Deloitte does this research. I think every year they research with 10,000 companies worldwide, and they ask them about trends in work. For 3 years straight, one of the biggest one, one of the top 2 or 3 trends has been something is broken in the way we structure work, and we have got to fix it. And each year it has become clearer what was broken. And this was the 3rd year. It was at 88%, but it was close to 90%. And look at the part in the purple at the bottom. Agility plays a central role in the organization of the future as companies race to replace structural hierarchies, that top-down system. They want to replace it with networks of teams. side to side. There's that flattened organization. And those teams are empowered to take action. And that has basically been the theme of this for 3 or 4 years in a row. It's interesting. Companies don't even know how to do this, and yet they're already saying we have to do it. Don't know what it means, don't know how to do it. But Albert Einstein said, intuition is the highest form of human intelligence. And these companies are intuiting that the top-down structure that they got from slavery, that went through serfdom, that got into the military, that went through the factories into modern day work, it's a bad idea. We need to do something else. So we're going to rewrite the rules. So the question isn't, is it broken? And the question isn't even, do we think it's broken? We know it's broken, and we can demonstrate it factually and intuitively. The only question left is, are we going to do something about it? With your 2-person, 5-person, 20-person, 100-person company, are we going to fix this? And what would it mean to you if you fixed it? So let's take a minute on this one. What are some things we could do to go from 30% engagement and 14% loving what they do to 100% engagement? What are some, just shout some things out, because again, Einstein, intuition is the highest form of human intelligence, and the wisdom of crowds says we already know the answer to this together. We just need to kind of get it out there. So let's take a minute. What are some things we could do to get people from 30% engagement and 14% loving what they do to 100%? Somebody said empowerment.
Porrick here, Chuck. I think start by asking questions. Just literally the why, how they found themselves in the position they're in. Do they love what they're doing? You know, questions are really going to be the answers, but sometimes we don't like to hear the answers.
No, we don't. Yeah, we're very insecure about that. We find out how insecure I am when I ask a question. I'm actually afraid I'll get an answer and I won't like it. Yeah, somebody said focus on culture. Find everyone's highest and best use. Let them have a voice. Powerful. Let them do what they're good at. Good grief, get out of their way. Don't force them into a role or a process. Just ask them. I love that. Well, go ahead. Somebody's got a comment?
Yeah, I think it goes back to also, how are we hiring people in the first place? Are we really clear? Are we really hiring people that are really suited to that position, or are we just sticking people in a box?
Yeah. Yeah, and we're going to find out that actually we don't have time for this today, but job descriptions actually aren't helpful. What's helpful is for everyone to figure out what the process is and then grab pieces of it. Play to their strengths. Give them a stake. Talk to them. Listen to them and ask what they would like or want. Get workforce involved in establishing beliefs and attitudes. That's huge, Glen Oaks. That's like, well, we can't do that. That's the job of the CEO. No, it's not. We're going to show you why you need to get everybody involved in establishing beliefs and attitudes and mission and all that stuff. Link to financial rewards, educate leaders, create the plan and vision, and then ask the employees to help the business get there. Get them involved. Remove power-based structure and hierarchy. Yeah, if you think about all this hierarchical stuff, CEO, president, vice president, director, managers, you just put this thing right beside a military model, you will find a one-for-one relationship. And what are both of those titles telling you? Whether it's general and CEO, colonel and president or vice president, what are those titles? What do they indicate?
We're supposed to get stuff done, and we're a tool in the process.
Okay. Yeah, I can tell, and you're right. And I can tell you what they don't indicate. They don't indicate what those people actually how they add value. They indicate something else about each of those people. What are those titles? What do titles like president, vice president, director, general, colonel, major, what do those things tell you? It's so obvious that we miss it because we've lived with it so long. And this actually didn't come to me about 2 or 3 years ago. So don't feel bad if you're missing it. All it tells us is about power. Who has the power to over who else? It's a power ranking. All of those titles, supervisor, manager, all of those have nothing to do with how people actually contribute. All it tells you is where do they end up in the ranking system. So I know who I can fire and I know who can fire me. What a really bad way to present yourself to the world around you. Somebody said, ask him what the hell gets him up in the morning and work with that. Yeah. Power. I'm the boss. Yeah. That's one of the problems. Status, pay scale, ego. That's what those things communicate. Placement in the business, actually, titles, just titles, power based on titles and positions. So we got to fix this. This is broken and it's fundamentally broken. We need to figure it out. So how do we rehumanize the workplace and give everybody their brain back? It's clear that in a top-down hierarchy, very few people are allowed to have brains. And there's some really bad assumptions and reasons behind that. The key thing, if you don't remember anything else from today, I'll hit you with this while we're fresh early on. This is the core practice of the participation age and of companies that are going to be successful going forward and are already successful today. How do we figure out how to get everybody, not a lot of people, everybody, the guy pushing the broom in the back of the warehouse and the person who used to claim that they were a vice president, and now they're just trying to help get things done. How do we get everybody making decisions? Never in a vacuum. Don't hear chaos and anarchy. This is more organized. This has more clarity about roles and responsibilities and metrics and all that stuff. But we got to figure out how to get everybody making these decisions. This is how you rehumanize the workplace. And you can't do it without distributing the leadership. So you can't have 7 people with 1 manager, 7 managers with 1 director, 7 directors with 1 vice president, 7 vice presidents with 1 You can't have that model where there's no distributed leadership. We've got to figure out how to distribute the leadership so that everybody is able to make decisions, never in a vacuum, but faster and better. So that's the key thing we'll walk through today. How do we distribute the decision making? Here's the key principle. The more input I have, so the question is why? Why should we distribute the decision making? Great question. This is it. You want engagement? You want 100% engagement? Then you need to get 100% of the people involved in the decision making. The more input I have in the decision, the more ownership I will have in carrying it out. Let me make this really simple. Input equals ownership. Input equals ownership. The more input I have, the more ownership I have. Can you see why most of work is broken? Most people don't have any input. What's the one thing, let me stop here for a second and ask this question. What's the one thing that makes us adult, that separates us from the child? We get to be called adult because we can do this, and children can do they can do some of it, but not very much of it. What's the one thing that makes us adult? Self-regulation, individualism. So self-regulation, yeah. We don't have to be told what to do. Responsible decision-making, yeah. That's the number one thing. All these other things you're typing in here, I think, come from that one. I remember when I finally did go to college, I got some ice cream and I put it in my freezer. And as I was closing the freezer door, I froze mid-close and I opened it again wide-eyed and I said, I can eat this anytime I want. There's no mom telling me, hey, you're going to ruin your dinner or whatever. And then as I closed it again, I stopped in mid-close again. I opened it again and I said, oh no, I can eat this anytime I want. That's being an adult. It's called agency of responsibility, the ability to make decisions. What's the one thing most people at work are not allowed to do? Don't torture this. Make decisions. Yeah. Somebody's typed that in, 2 or 3 different people. Yeah. We're taught to be automatons and just hang out and wait for somebody to tell us what to do. It's remarkable how smart people can be outside of work, figure out career paths and who they're going to marry and buy houses and cars and kids and all kinds of incredibly complex stuff. And as soon as they cross the threshold at work, they're dumber than a mud fence. We got to figure this out. So input equals ownership. Second principle in this, decision should be made locally whenever possible. If you're going to have distributed decision-making, if you want to turn people back into adults and stop treating them like children who can't make decisions, then you have to make decisions locally where they're going to be carried out. The 3 people who make the copies, they should buy the copier. Never in a vacuum, always in concert with other people so that they make a good decision that affects the best of the company. So they have to take the company's best in They can't make decisions if the company says that won't work for the company. Try again. But they should buy the copier. And it's almost always possible to do this. Too often we say, I don't have time for that nonsense. Well, that's because you've never done it before. And the more you tell people what to do, the more you're going to create that codependence. We'll talk about that in a bit. So what's the result of distributed decision-making? I will show you companies that do this that have everybody involved. Yeah, okay, practically it's probably always like around 90 or 93 or 95%. But what's happening is the 3 to 5 to 7 to 10% who aren't engaged, they get pushed out by the 90+% who won't put up with them. I worked with one company in Silicon Valley who said, if you can't take input here, you're not going to survive because we're all broken. We all need help. And, so we've had people who are really fragile and couldn't live in community with other people and be 100% engaged. So we just had to move them along. When you get to 60, 70, or 80% engagement, that's going to take over as your dominant culture, and they're going to push out the people who aren't. That's one of the problems with 30% engagement is that they're pushing out the people who are engaged. 70% are pushing out the 30%. All right, so here's the 3 practices that we're going to talk about today. We can't get to all of them, and we're only going to touch the surface on these. Again, they're all 3 in the book, and you'll get most of these in 3 to 5 Club, but you'll get a lot of other things on how to actually get off the treadmill, which is core to 3 to 5 Club. All right, so we're going to talk about leader here. And as I do that, the first thing I want to talk about here is a profile that we built about 10, 12 years ago. I had a friend who is an expert in these things, and he told me that as I was building this thing, he said, you realize there are 5,200, I didn't know this, he's an expert in this stuff. There are 5,200 psychometric tests in the world. That was 10 years ago, so it's probably 8,000 now. And he said, so why in the world do we need yours? Great question. And I didn't have an answer for it. And he said, I have an answer for you. What is it? He said, because yours is the only one that actually looks at business with business questions and does everything from the eyes of a business owner. It's a psychometric test that was designed for business owners. The questions are business owner questions and business leader questions. And the results are not, Myers-Briggs ENTP or DISC test, DISC, which you have to then interpret for business. The answers are you're either market focused, systems focused, or product focused. You're probably a mix of 2 of those, and one of them you don't have much of. And you got to figure out how to cover yourself for this. If everyone is a leader, we're going to make that case here in a second. Then we need to figure out what our strengths are, and we need to hire people who aren't like us. So what we're going to do here, this is normally a $79 thing for you, and we're going to make that basically free for you today. And Megan will put these in the chat box again because there's been a lot of things that went through there. But if you want to take this profile and get the code, just pick whichever one email below that Megan puts in the chat box, grab it, send them and say, give me the code for this. And then when you get to the screen where there's a money, it'll say $79. Right below that is a place where you can put the code in. Put the code in there, hit enter, turns it to 0, and off you go. And I would love for you to do this even with the code with some of the leaders in your company if you have others. Glad to have you pass it on as well as for being on this seminar today. Okay. All right. So I'm largely market focused. I'm a raging market focused entrepreneurial type. Entrepreneurs hang out there. Business owners hang out in the product focused space more often than not. Most business owners, and a business owner I define differently than an entrepreneur. A business owner is smart enough to have learned something with somebody else, and then they break free and they go do it themselves. They build their own company around it. So I worked as a plumber for 10 years for the man, and now I'm going to start my own plumbing company. Business owners tend to do that kind of thing and are really smart about it, and they stick to their knitting. Entrepreneurs don't have much common sense. That's me. And they do things they don't even know anything about. They look around and say, hey, that looks like an opportunity. Let me do that. Do you know anything about it? No. Well, that doesn't matter. Let's just go do it. And they keep switching to different things. Product-focused business owners will stick to their knitting and do that thing. Bill Gates is a product-focused business owner. He is not an entrepreneur. He learned to program. He started his own company, and he spent his whole career doing that one thing, and doing it deeper and bigger and all that. But he's a product-focused business owner. Richard Branson is an entrepreneur. He's got 460 some companies, and he did a lot of things. He had no clue what was going on. And then in the middle are systems focused people, and the people on either end of those don't like the people in the middle, and that's what gets them in trouble. We need to love systems focused people, because those are the people who tend to work more in giant corporations. They don't start their own companies too often, although they will start franchises. But those are the people who understand systems and how to make something go. And you need those people and in your business. And the majority of the people in your business should be systems and product focused. All right. So take that profile. You're going to have a lot of fun with that and discuss it as a team. It'll really be enlightening to you. All right. I want to give you an example of leader to leader, the most powerful short-term example of how distributed decision-making works that I've ever seen. I came across this book 6 or 8 years ago after I'd already written my first book about distributed decision-making. And this guy never uses the term, but it's exactly what he did. This guy, David Marquet, he inherited the worst rated submarine in the entire U.S. Navy. It had been the worst rated submarine in the entire U.S. Navy for 3 straight years. And in 1 year, he turned it into the best, not just a good, but the best rated sub in the entire U.S. Navy. And this is the most important little bit of data in that. He did it with the same 134 people that had made it the worst for 3 straight years. He wasn't allowed to change anybody out. This is really informative, because too often when things are broken, the first place we go is, man, I got to get new people. This is broken. He didn't get anybody new. He did one simple thing. He implemented distributed decision-making, and it changed everything. And here's how he did it. He got everybody together, and he called the principle leader. By the way, Picasso said, "Great artists plagiarize, or good artists plagiarize, great artists steal." And so I've stolen this term for him, leader. I think that's perfect. And he got everybody together, all 134 people on the sub, and he said, okay, here's how this is going to work. The Navy calls me the commander. Don't tell the Navy, but I'm not going to do that anymore. Not going to command anybody. Not going to do the top-down hierarchy, tell you what to do thing. Not going to do it. Here's how we're going to work going forward. He called it intentional leadership. Everyone on this boat is going to be involved in intentional leadership. And here's how it'll work. Instead of going to someone else that you respect and saying, what should I do? You're no longer allowed to do that. Don't ever come to me again saying, what should I do? You're going to come to me having already figured out what you think might be the best course of action, and you're going to start your sentence with, I intend to. Intentional leadership. Here's what I intend to do. And then my job is going to be to ask you a lot of questions if I need to. How does that work for the torpedo room? How does that work for the galley? How does that work for the Navy? How does that work for our mission? And I'm going to make sure that what you're doing makes sense. So you can see decisions are never made in a vacuum. They're made in concert with everybody. And if David Marquet said, I don't like your decision, his response would be, here's questions I have about your decision. Go solve those. Don't do that until you solve these questions. But I'm still not going to tell you what to do. I'm going to ask you to go come up with something else. Come back to me with something else and say, we intend to do this instead. And I'm going to ask you hard questions. And he took this to the point where he said, I will not ever take over, not even during combat. Now, they never went into combat, but they regularly, a few times a year, regularly had war exercises with other submarines, and they were graded based on how they came out in these war exercises. And he never once took command. He would have people saying, I intend to do this, I intend to do that. And he would basically, if it was a good thing, he'd just say, make it so, work it out. On that one simple principle, in 1 year, where he turned everybody's brains on, turned them back into adults, where they were allowed and required to make decisions. On that one simple principle, it turned it into the best rated sub in the U.S. Navy. And I think it's important to say here, after he left, he was there for about 3 years. And after he left that boat, for the next 8 to 10 years, it turned out more Navy captains and more submarine leaders than any other ship in the entire U.S. Navy. after he was gone. And there's some information in this we don't have time to go into today, but basically one of the problems we have in business is we think business is a cult of personality. We got to get this giant Steve Jobs, Jack Welch, Richard Branson personality to come in and make this thing work, because that's the only way business works. No, you don't. You do not have to be that kind of person. You don't have to be able to give George Patton speeches or Margaret Thatcher kind of stuff. Right? You don't have to do any of that nonsense. You have to simply have a cult of systems. And he had one simple little system. And then he had other systems as well, processes. But his major system was distributed decision-making. And when those people embraced that decision-making system, they understood how good it was for them. They took it over, and it became their system, to the point that when he was gone, through 2 or 3 other Navy captains who wanted to change it, they couldn't change it. These people had a way of doing things and passing it on to the next people. In those 8 or 10 years, none of those 134 people were still on the same, those original people were still on the boat. So this is really powerful stuff. You want to figure out how to get a company to run without you? Are any of you tired? I know I regularly have to take my business for a walk and say, okay, let's get our relationship straight. I own you. You don't own me. And this is one of the major ways you're going to do this. You've got to turn everybody else's brains on and help them learn how to make decisions in community, safe decisions in community that will be better decisions than if you made them by yourself or a manager. All right, so pretty powerful story. You can get his book. It's a simple book. He doesn't talk about any of these things in there, but you'll see these principles raging throughout the book. All right, so I want to give you my definition of leadership. When I say everybody can lead, this is why I say that, because this is my understanding of leadership. Any act that improves the life, situation, or performance of anybody else. Any act that improves the life, situation, or performance of another individual. With that definition of leadership, who can lead? And I believe anybody can lead. If I can improve your life or your situation or your performance, if I'm pushing a broom and you see how I push the broom, you realize, hey, I'm pushing the broom in a circle, and that actually works better than pushing it end to end. That's leadership. You've taught me how to improve my performance. That's leadership. If you clean out the microwave at work and I see you doing that, and I know that's not your job, that inspires me to do things that nobody will see when I'm at work that aren't part of my job. That improves my life, my situation, and my performance. That's leadership. When you mentor a friend, all of those things. So everybody can be a leader. We'll get a little bit more on that in a second. All right, so I want to get some of your ideas on this. What are some other practical ways? Distributed decision-making is the core practice. So we've identified, how do we create leader? We got to get everybody involved in decisions. What are some other ways that we can get everybody to be to lead each other? Some other things that people could do to lead each other. How can one person in the call center lead somebody else in the call center? They're both on the phones. Nobody has more rank than the other one. Okay, provide opportunities for people to showcase their skills. Yeah, recognize them for that. Yeah, no questions without an answer. Share what works well. Talk and communicate. Be a good example. Share ideas. Provide context and ask for ideas, which is more of the distributed decision-making. Yeah, a lot of things here. Give the freedom to improve, be of service. See, interestingly enough, the ancient word for leader in the Greek, in the Hebrew, and the Chinese, and in other languages, the ancient word for leader actually has an element of, or completely means, servant. And we've lost that. Give responsibility. Recognize what's done by the peers. Yeah, great opportunity. Communicate what you learn. Let them see their own targets. Drink more beer. Now we're getting there. Finally getting practical. Someday they're going to reopen the pubs so we can do that. They're already open here, so you guys can be jealous. Actually, they might be open over there. Are they open over this in the other side of the ocean yet? No, got a lot of this going on. Sorry about that. Come to Denver. We'll show you a good time. We have some bad Guinness over here that hasn't traveled well, but we got some other things that have worked. All right, build community into the work. Do home bars count? Yeah, that counts. Encourage sharing ideas. All right, so a lot of great things there, and I think you're all on par with where we're going. I found 4 ways that encapsulate a lot of things what you guys just said that create leadership. There's 4 ways that we lead each other. Anybody leads anybody else. So there's 4 ways you can lead. Here's one. Well, in fact, I'll do this first. Shouldn't even show you that word. I want you to give me shout out or put it in the chat, either one. When I say the word leader, what comes to mind? Give me an individual, somebody you can name, or a type of person, an image that comes to mind, either one or both. What comes to mind? Leader. Confident, experienced, bold, empowered. Someone setting an example. Laugh out loud, Trump, Malali, look up. Empathy. Yeah, give me some names of people you think are great leaders. Over history. It doesn't even have to be right now. Somebody's caring. Nelson Mandela. Yeah, somebody's three different people. The New Zealand Prime Minister. Churchill. Colin Powell. John Timpson. Lincoln. Heenan. Okay, we're not really straying. John Heenan. Yeah, we probably have to put him in there, unfortunately. He's going to get a swelled head now. Mother Teresa. Okay, look what's going into the chat here, guys. Jesus Christ. Mohammed. I mean, look who's going into the chat here and what we're thinking. I'm going to suggest to you that these are all great leaders. And I'm also going to suggest to you that they are the rarest form of leadership. Thankfully, because we really don't need a lot of John Heenans. One is plenty. One is all we need. So there's 4 ways we can lead people, and I'll get to the one we're all talking about that we all think of when we think of leader. Here's one way people can lead. I can be something. It's about character and honesty, integrity, kindness. Could you be kind to someone? Have you ever been in a room where you're just in a room with someone who's really kind and you're kinder as a result? Maybe even for a few minutes afterwards, maybe for a whole day. That's leadership. Can you be something? That can make you a leader. And then doing, where we're more skilled, we have more expertise, we have more experience, we can produce faster, we figured out a process that someone else doesn't have, figure out a way to do things. I'm better at answering the phone and selling something, or fill in the blank. We can do something and we can lead with that. Hey, how do you do that? How do you get so many people to do X? Help me with that. That is leadership. The third one is the one we all just talked about. Inspirational leadership, that motivational, John Wayne, rugged individualist, guy in a white horse out front of the army. That is the rarest form of leadership, but it's the one that gets the most press. It's the one that we talk about the most. It's the one that we idolize the most. And all the rest of the world that is doing leadership on a daily basis, we're just ignoring it. And it's criminal. It really is. So we need inspirational leadership. And all of us can be inspirational as well. In fact, being things and doing things can inspire. So we're automatically inspirational that way. The fourth way that I've found that we can lead is by relating. Can you be a friend? Can you be a mediator? Can you be someone who helps bring clarity to somebody else's life? Can you ask good questions? These are the 4 ways we think people can lead. They can be something. They can do something. They can inspire, and they can relate. And if you can come up with, I'd love if you have any other ideas on how people can lead that don't fall into these 4 buckets. We're always learning. None of this stuff is set in cement. But the answer to the question, can anybody lead, lays right here. Everybody can be something, do something. Everybody can be inspiring, and everybody can be relational. We have an exercise we do. It's called the Leader Tool. And I want you guys to get this. Megan will throw these back in because, again, they've gotten eaten alive by the very busy chat. Appreciate that. So if you want the Leader Tool and figure out where you're going to get it from, we'll send you it's a simple 1-pager that you can do as an exercise with the 1 or 2 or 3 or 10 or 100 other people in your organization to help them figure out how they lead. Because most people are going to say, I'm not a leader. The reason they say they're not a leader is because they're thinking of John Wayne or, Mahatma Gandhi. No, it's not. That's not it. You are a leader, and we're going to have to reteach people how they lead by being, doing, inspiring, and relating. And this is a tremendously powerful tool. It could take anywhere from 15 minutes to maybe 45 minutes at the top. probably 30 minutes. And you break people up into groups of 4, 5, or 6. And I can't share the whole tool here, but basically some of the teams will need tissue paper boxes with them because people are going to get emotional. They have no idea how they've been leading the people who sit right beside them every day. Very powerful tool. So grab that one. All right, let's talk about distributed decision-making. And then we're going to have time for questions at the end as well. But if you have questions in the middle, Sandy, John, grab those. And I'm not watching that closely. If there's questions on this stuff, guys, throw them out. We don't need to leave them till the end because then it might be too late. All right, let's move on to the second tool here. And these will go faster as we move. Distributed decision-making. So this guy, Bill Gore, you might not know who Bill Gore is, but you know what Gore-Tex is. Probably. Gore-Tex is that waterproof, wind-resistant product. He invented this fabric while he was working at DuPont. And he said, hey, I got this great fabric we should do something with it. And DuPont said, nah, we don't know what to do with that. So he quit and took the technology with him. And now it's a it's a $2 billion a year company, $3 billion a year company, 10,000 people. 1958, he invented this. He and his wife, Vivian, started their company in the basement of their house in 1958. And he came up with this idea of what he called the lattice organization, which is basically a distributed decision-making model. It's the same thing. In 1967, he wrote it down. You can find this on the internet. Just look for Bill Gore lattice organization paper or something like that. It's 16 pages long, and I love it because each page maybe has 30 or 40 or 50 words on it. You can read the whole paper in 20 minutes, 15 minutes. And he loves simplicity, and this demonstrates it. So this is how distributed decision-making works. If Alan wants to talk to Laura, or if Team A wants to talk to Team L, Team A talks to Team L. Alan talks to Laura. Except we have a problem here. In most organizations, we have something in the middle of this called the top-down hierarchy. And it looks like this. If Alan wants to talk to Laura or Team A wants to talk to Team L, the first thing they have to do is go through their supervisor, who then sends it to their manager, who then sends it to their director, and then the director sends it back to the manager, and the manager sends it back to the supervisor and says, yeah, approved or not approved, we can talk to Laura. And then it goes across to Laura's supervisor and goes to her manager and back to her director and down the, and it probably never gets to Laura because there's too much politics involved, especially if it was a good idea. It gets killed either at the first or second place because somebody's going to say, wait a minute, I'm the manager and that's a good idea. And it's going to make me look bad. I should have thought of that. Or I just have more priorities about how to get myself promoted. This isn't going to help me. 10 on the inside, it's 10 touches to get something to communicate with somebody else in the organization. And it's as many as 38 touches for anything to get communicated. Anybody wonder why the larger you get, the more it slows down? Hello? Here it is, right here. What if we did this? So I want to stop on this a minute. Whoops, sorry. I want to stop on this for a second. What are some of basic? This is the top-down management model. So these people in the red boxes, these are managers, supervisors, managers, directors, vice presidents. They're managers. And the problem with this role, you can see one of the problems here. But why do these people exist? What are the basic assumptions that lead us to have all these boxes in between Alan and Laura? What are some reasons that we do that? Lots of reasons that we think, lots of assumptions that those people need to be in the middle there.
I suppose that the thinking is that the people are too stupid to do anything by their own.
Yeah. It's Douglas McGregor wrote a book in 1960 called The Human Side of Enterprise, and he postulated theory X, theory Y. Theory X, people are stupid and lazy. Theory Y, people are smart and motivated. And then he found companies where the leadership believed either one of those, and then he looked at the company, and whichever one they believed, that was the self-fulfilling prophecy they came up with. But managers, if people are stupid and lazy, you got to have somebody who's smart and motivated to get them moving. That's core to this whole thing. Managers know more. That's an assumption. No trust, the accountability factor. They're getting the opportunity to speak and boy, do they speak. Yeah. It's usually an audience with the Pope. It's not a meeting. I'm smarter than you. Must have someone with a checklist because this is the way it's always been done. Boy, isn't that the truth? From slavery on through the military on into the factories, out into the participation age. This is the way we've always done it. Yeah, there's a lot of bad reasons why we have people in place. Somebody says power and control. That's number one, is I like being the person who has the power and the control. Well, Scott Adams has made millions of dollars on this structure right here. He's the guy who wrote Dilbert, the cartoon. If you don't know what Dilbert is, man, look it up because it's funny and you will relate to it instantly. You will find yourself in there. And the problem with this thing here is that Albert and Laura actually know what to do. And these other 6 people in the middle are keeping them from doing it. And they really don't know what to do. And that's the basis for Dilbert. It's precious. The guy was so insightful 30, 40, 50 years ago when he put that together. So what if we did this differently? This is interesting. I did this research when I wrote this book. Here's questions I asked, 3 questions I asked. Do managers make people more productive? 400 million hits, not a single answer. They're all basically answers that say, here's how to make managers better. And then I asked, do managers add value? 400 million hits. And a lot of the answers was no and heck no. And there was no research showing that managers add value. I cannot find a single study outside of one that attempts to answer the question, do managers add value? I think that's really important because I believe that we have managers because we think they add value. I can't find any research that backs it up. I find one study by Google that asked the question, what do people need at work? And they came up with 10 things that they need in order to function. And then Google made this giant leap that said, therefore, managers are important. Well, what if those 10 things could be given to each other by each other? Then the last one, can people at work manage themselves without a manager? 385 million hits. Most of the answers are, of course they can. Yes, they can. And there's really good research. And there are over 1,000 companies with 500 plus stakeholders. We don't call them employees. 500 plus employees or stakeholders that have no managers, 1,000 plus that we know of, and thousands of smaller ones. And they all live at the top of their industries. So we have data that say managers are not a good idea. Why do we have managers? All those reasons we just talked about. And the worst of them is because that's just the way it's always been. We don't want to change. So you can find more articles on all of the things we're talking about today. Megan, if you can put this in the chat box, if you've got it, take a screenshot out of it and then put it in the chat box. And I wrote for Inc. magazine. I wrote for 4 or 5 years until they started censoring me because I guess, well, I don't guess, I know there were specifically some of their top-down hierarchy companies who were very nervous about what I was writing, who basically said to them, hey, we spend a lot of advertising money on you, shut this guy down. They did it very obliquely, but I basically just walked away. It just became onerous to try and to write for them. But most of these articles out there are going to have a lot of things in here that would be very helpful in pushing you forward with this stuff. All right, so back to what it looks like. Here's what it looks like in most organizations, and here's what it should look like in any organization that makes sense. Elon Musk sent out an email 2 years ago to his entire organization. I nearly have it memorized. I should have put it on the screen. He basically said this: if Alan needs to talk to Laura, which is where I got this, if one person needs to talk to another person, those 2 people need to talk until the right thing happens. And then he says, and they do not have to go through a manager, they do not have to go through anybody else. If 2 people need to get together and talk, they talk until the right thing happens. And then he said, if anybody gets in the way of this, if any manager, he specifically said, if any manager gets in the way of this, you will find yourself working at another company. I am not kidding. And he just went on a rant for about a page and a half, basically saying this top-down thing, this is broken. And he said, he went through the whole, if somebody wants to talk to somebody, they have to go through their manager and back to their director and all that. And he said, this is nuts, because it is. So we got to figure out how to do this. Distributed decision-making gives us this model without chaos, without anarchy. Here's a great picture. I want to give you a picture of what it looks like to have a distributed decision-making team and distributed decision-making as a way of life. And then we're going to talk about how you actually do it as our final of 3 things. Who's in charge in this photo? Just hit your space bar. I'm not going to take this off, so just shout this one out. Who's in charge in this photo?
One with the ball.
Yeah, don't torture this. The guy with the ball. I mean, they're all responsible to try and get the ball, but who's in charge right now? Well, whoever's controlling the ball. Okay. Who's in charge here? Nobody has the ball yet. Who's in charge? This is really paradigm shifting for us. So it's stuff that will be obvious once you see it, but it's difficult for us. Well, so everyone has the opportunity to be in charge. And the reality of it is whoever gets to the ball first is going to be in charge. And so they're taking initiative. Now, imagine if you can do this with hurling, with field hockey, soccer, ice hockey, basically any game where most of the people are going to get the ball or the puck during the game frequently. This analogy, sports analogy, does not work with things like baseball or American football. Those are top-down hierarchical sports, and you can go for an entire season and never touch the ball. And that's why I like this kind of game as an analogy. So whatever game you're used to working with, rugby, any of those, they work. Imagine being on a soccer team like this one, and you're the fullback in white, and you're not actually running toward the ball, and the ball is right in front of you in the halfback's quadrant, and you're shouting at the coach on the sidelines, hey, coach, can you believe this? The ball is in the halfback's quadrant, and he's not there to get the ball. It's just sitting there. He's derelict, man. He's not around. Somebody needs to do something about this, coach. How long do you think that person would be on the field? No, man, if the ball is in front of you and you have an opportunity to get to it first, you get to the ball and then you ask questions later. Look at the video later. There might have been a good reason why the halfback was out of position. Get to the ball. You don't have a job description. You have a responsibility to make sure this company works. And if you see any opportunity or any obstacle in front of you, the first thing you should say is, what do I need to do with that? Now, you might get to the ball and kick it right to somebody else because that's the right answer. I see that the copier is broken. I don't know anything to do about that, but I'm not going to just walk away and say, well, hey, coach, somebody should do, can you believe that this copier is broken? Somebody ought to do something about that. No, you saw it. You're the leader. The first person to see something, the first person to see a ball loose on the field or loose in your business, if you see a ball loose in the business, you're the leader. Figure out what to do. And in some cases, the best thing you can do is find somebody else and make them aware that you think might be the right person to be in charge of this whole project. Find somebody that makes copies or some other thing and say, hey, did you realize the copier is on its last legs? And hand the ball off. But don't walk away from the ball. Anybody ever hear this statement at work? That's not my job. Probably never, right? Nah, never heard that. All the time. That's not my job. That will get you fired at the Crankset Group. That's not my job. There's no such thing as that's not my job. Your job is to make the company successful. And yes, you have clear roles and responsibilities within that. But if there's a ball loose in the field that's not your role or your responsibility and you see it, it is your job to grab that ball and get it to somebody else who can work with it or work with it yourself. So I love this analogy. That would get you fired from this soccer team, and boy, it ought to get you taken off of any other team as well. If you're standing around looking at loose opportunities or loose obstacles in your business and saying somebody ought to do something about that, that's a training moment. And if someone won't respond to the training over a reasonable period of time, you need to find somebody else who will do this. So great analogy for what a distributed decision-making team is. Find the ball loose in the field. Here's another reason why I like this analogy. Where is the coach? Where's the coach? Somebody shout it out.
Sideline.
He's on the sidelines. Does that make the coach irrelevant? No. Coach is really important. The coach is a strategic leader. These guys are tactical leaders. Everybody's a leader. They're all leading in different ways. And that person has been given strategic leadership to help them figure out vision and guidance and a training plan. And he wants to make sure he puts the right people on the team. But he's on the sideline. Once he's got these people, he gets out of their way. Managers never get out of people's way. Doesn't happen. They can't. By virtue of their job, they find their value in staying in people's way. I'm smarter and more motivated than you. I know these processes better than you. I can figure this stuff out better than you. Well, that's great. But a leader would say, if any of that was true, I'm going to train you to figure that out so that you can do it, and I will get out of the way. Imagine a hurling team or a rugby team, squad, or anything where we'll just take this one because it's on the screen. Imagine a soccer team where the coach is on the sideline and everybody has an earpiece. And the coach is talking into a microphone. Number 3, kick the ball to number 7. Number 7, kick the ball to number 9. Number 9, kick the ball up the side. Number 9, number 11, take a shot. Who would play for that team? Nobody. Do we do that kind of stuff at work? All day long. Everybody has an earpiece in their ear, and the manager is telling them what to do. They're just sitting around waiting for somebody else to tell them what to do. And when they see a ball loose in the business, they say, can you believe that? Somebody should do something about that. We've got this whole thing wrong. We need to get rid of the whole concept of managing people. And we don't have time to go into it today, but the mantra is lead people, manage stuff. And in most sports, the manager, not necessarily in soccer, but in most sports, the manager is actually the person who takes care of equipment, the field, the water, all the stuff. They manage the stuff. So it's a great analogy. All right. On to the last of our of our things to look at here today. 2-step decision making. Let's see. There we go. There's three decision-making structures that we put in place in business, and by the way, in your house. So if you have a great, if you feel like your family is operating great, pay attention. You're probably in the middle of these. If you feel like you got some ways to improve, pay attention. There's probably something happening on either end of these two things. Good principles, human principles, should work in business and in life and everywhere else. So 3 different decision-making structures. One is the independent structure. Every man for himself, the John Wayne rugged individualist. Americans love this one. Leave me alone. I'm an adult. I can make decisions. I don't need your help. Well, the problem is we're mammals. We're made to live in community, and it requires a team to get stuff done, and you just can't make decisions on your own. Most sales organizations run this way, even in companies that do other things, and it's not helpful. And it's traditional management in some ways. But this is the more common one. We call it the codependent structure. This is the most traditional. Most people are involved in this management structure. This is the top-down hierarchy for the most part. It's a tell-do model. I will tell and you will do. And we call it codependent because interestingly enough, here's the definition of codependent. Classic definition. I didn't make it up. Think of managers when I share this definition of codependent. Doing for others what they could or should do for themselves. That's the manager's job. I'm smarter. I'm more motivated. I know the process. I know I have more experience. And I'm not going to tell any of that to you because then I'll become irrelevant. And on the other side of the equation is someone who says, I just want to show up at work. I really don't want to make decisions. And so the manager says, I need somebody to tell what to do. That's a codependent position. And the other person says, well, that's convenient because I want somebody to tell me what to do. I worked with a company with 300 people. We normally work with smaller companies, but I worked with a company with 300 people out in California where one guy told me, hey, this is going to be really hard for me because I actually took this job because I recognized I would never have to make a decision and I wouldn't have to bring my brain to work. I would be told what to do and all I had to do was execute. So there's codependence there and we've got to get people out of it. We allow them and we require them to make decisions. People who are naturally stakeholders, they'll run to this and say, well, it's about time you allow me to make decisions. And other people are going to have to be required. But 100% of us will get there if we're required. So this is the major model. Here's what psychologists would say is the healthiest interaction method, as well as the best way to work at work. It's called the interdependent structure. I could be independent. I could do this on my own. I could wait around for you to tell me what to do. But the best place for all of us is where we're all adults. We all could be independent. I don't need you, but I want you because I'd be crazy to try and do this on my own. And that's the interdependent model of human interaction as well as structuring a business. That's where we find teams become community, and that's where distributed decision-making lives. So we're going to talk about two-step decision-making here as we close out to give you the simple way to do distributed decision making. I told you up front that the core practice here is distributed decision making. I'm going to give you the tool that makes that happen. So what is it? What does it do? What does two-step decision making do for us? It creates localized ownership. Remember, input equals ownership, and people commit to what they create. I love that statement. I got that from one of our 3 to 5 club members. Reduced risk of bad decisions made in a vacuum by one manager. You will have fewer bad decisions. You will still have them, but you will have fewer bad ones if you have 2 or 3 or 4 or 7 people involved in this decision and you run it through the organization with this two-step decision-making process than you would by having one manager or a manager and director make this and impose it on people. And it creates good decisions by healthy interdependence. It creates true teamwork. And that is the two-step decision-making process. I don't know. I just had to put this on here because it makes me laugh. I think that's called the two-step from 1930? Sorry. Entertaining myself there. Two-step decision-making. Here is the rule. So wake back up if you've been relaxed and kind of sitting and absorbing. I got you up front to think about distributed decision-making. Now I'm going to show you how to do it. 2 very simple steps. Not easy. Simple. Might take you weeks to months to get people to actually do these things. But if you get people to do these things, it's going to change your organization. And we're going to show you the examples of how that changed people here in a second. Step number 1, decisions. The principle here is decisions should be made where they are carried out. So the question is, who has to carry this out? If I see a broken copier, the first thing I should ask myself is, who makes the most copies? Who has to carry this out? Who will actually live with this decision more than anybody else in this organization? Let me take that ball and take it to them and say, hey, did you know your copier is broken? So that's step number 1. Or let's say I'm one of those people and I realize, okay, I'm one of the 3 people who make copies. The 3 of us make 80% of all the copies in this business. So I get the other 3 people. I ask myself, who will carry this out? Well, the 3 of us. We're the ones who need to buy a copier. If they went out and bought a copier, that would be chaos and anarchy. Let's not say that's a good idea. Step number 2 makes it all work. Those 3 people get together. They look at the copier and say, yep, Bob, you're right. You're the leader. You recognize that we have a bad copier. We need to do something about that. And then immediately, not later, immediately they ask question number 2. Who will be affected by us buying a copier? Because that's the second principle of distributed decision-making. Anybody affected should be consulted before you buy the copier. So who else might be affected if someone was buying a copier? If you think about it, the most obvious answer, excuse me, the most obvious answer is whoever has to pay for it. So if you're a larger organization with an accounting team or a budget, you need to talk to that person and say, hey, our copier looks like it's on its last legs. We want to buy a new copier. Does that work with you guys? And then you might want to talk to whoever receives copiers. That should be your first instinct, is to talk to the customer. What does the customer need? 3-hole and 2-sided and color and staple. What do you need? Let's find out what the customer needs. And then technology. Let's make sure if we're a Mac shop or a PC shop, we got to buy something that's commensurate with our technology. So you can put out this is where Slack or other company-wide simple communication systems work so well. You could put a Slack comment out. Just look at slack.com if you're not familiar with that. It's a great communications tool for this kind of thing. And if there's 20 of you and you're not sure who will be affected, put something out on Slack that says it's like Twitter for just your business, and everybody gets it. And you say, hey, we're thinking of buying a new copier. We're having a meeting on Thursday at 2:00. If you can't be there, give us your input. And if you're not there, we'll assume you don't care. Or if you want to be, if you can't be there and you still want input, we'll figure it out. We'll come see you. And then you go talk to the people are going to be affected, the budget, technology, the customer. But you cover people that way, and you can have your meeting and get input. And this is basically doing what David Marquet said. We come up with a plan, and then we take it to the strategic leadership and say, here's what we intend to do. And what does strategic leadership do? They ask hard questions. And if they can't see why that works for the company, then they'll tell you that. Hey, this looks like it would work really great for the 3 of you. I see why you want to buy this copier. It's awesome, but it's going to kill us. So we can't live with that. That doesn't work for everybody. You live in community. You're not rugged individuals. We are interdependent. And so go find another copier. I'm still not going to tell you what to buy, but I'm going to tell you this one doesn't work for us. So go be intentional somewhere else and do it a different way. These 2 questions are going to, whether you ever want to join a participation agent or not, these 2 questions will do for your company what it did for David Marquet's boat. Powerful, powerful stuff. I would encourage you to do this and memorize these, take them out. This is one of the 12 tools in the distributed decision-making, of distributed decision-making in our book, Re-Humanizing the Workplace. So we have a whole chapter on how to do this, but this is the nuts and bolts of it. It's very simple, and you'll find that people regularly, mistakenly violate number 2 without even knowing it. They think since the 3 of them got together, that's everybody who's affected. No, it's not. You need to take it a little farther. All right, so that's 2-step decision-making. I'm going to share with you again, now that we've gone through this, excuse me, here's some companies that actually have done this participation age stuff. Here's a company with 2 people. It was actually 2.5. He had a half-time person, and he worked out of his garage. He was a mortgage broker, very successful, 15 years, making hundreds of thousands of dollars a year personally. And he had a loan processor, and she made $55,000 a year. And she processed 8 to 10 loans a month, which in the U.S. is about near the top of what would be expected of someone. $55,000 a year, 8 to 10 loans a month. He presented to her a different way of doing business that we don't have time to go into today with incentives. It's one of the 12 tools, and involving her in the process and helping her figure out the processes themselves. And with the incentives and turning her brain loose, within a year, and he's confirmed this with me, this is going to be shocking, within a year, she was making $125,000 a year after 15 years of being stuck around 55 or with just a small increase every year. And she was processing 22 to 30 loans every month, and mortgage companies across America say that's not possible. All the managers and all the mortgage organizations across America would say you can't do that. But when they gave it to one of the workers to figure out, and they incentivized her, for every loan you process, you're going to get a piece of this. All of a sudden, she's a capitalist, and she figured this stuff out. This is really tectonic shift kind of stuff. And of course, he made a lot more money as well. So instead of hiring 2.5 more loan processors, they both made more money. All right, here's a small staging company that I mentioned before. This woman was making revenue was $185,000 US per year, and she was taking home about $35,000 to $40,000 a year. It was a little hobby business for her. She moved to Denver from Washington, D.C., where this business was. And she moved, and I met her the first week she was here. She came with her husband, who had a fancy job here. And I said, what'd you do back in D.C.? She said, well, I had this little staging company where we staged houses to sell houses faster. And I'm shutting it down. Well, why are you shutting it down? She looked at me like I wasn't listening. I moved to Denver. And I said, so what? You moved to Denver. It's 2,000 miles. That's 2/3 of the way across our big U.S. company or country, but 2,000 miles. I said, so? She said, you're nuts. So I said, well, just for grins, as you're shutting it down, you've got stuff staged. It's going to take you a couple months to shut it down. How about if we just see if we can actually grow it? And she said, no, I'm really interested in shutting it down, but if you want to help me do that, you can. So I helped her start shutting it down by giving the 1.5 people who were left back in DC the ability to make decisions and figure this thing out. And they kept staging new houses and new houses and new houses. About 3 years later, it was a $4 million organization. 4.5, I think, is where they topped out. 55 people working there now. And she works 3 days a week from Denver, 2,000 miles away. And she goes out there once every 8 to 12 weeks for 4 or 5 days to make sure it's still there. And against my advice, she started 2 more businesses 2,000 miles away in Washington, D.C., one of which became the best rated furniture store in all of D.C. She did this because she turned everybody's brains back on. And she told me, if I was still in Washington, D.C., I would still be driving trucks and hanging pictures, and it would still look just like this. But she had to get everybody involved. GE Aviation, they make most of they make about 1/3 of all the airplanes engines in the world. They have 8 factories, and not a single one of them has a manager in it. All of some of the most highly technical and safety-oriented kind of technology in the world is made in 8 factories where there are no managers. It's all distributed decision-making teams who use things like 2-step decision-making to get things done. So I'm sharing that with you because you can see that they obviously need to have roles, responsibilities, clarity, processes, metrics. You will find that if you do things this way, you will end up with more of those things that will help you move forward than when you have a managed top-down hierarchy. And then the last one, a giant corporation, 75,000 people. They own 10% of the white goods market worldwide, appliances, washers, dryers, ranges, refrigerators, all of that kind of stuff. They have 75,000 full-time people, 90,000 part-time people, not a single manager in the entire place. All of them live on teams of 10 to 15 people, and every team is a cost and profit center. If you work in accounting for Hire Corporation in Denver, you're an accounting team of 10 or 15 people. And if the rest of the corporation in Hire in Denver doesn't like you, doesn't feel like their accounting team is working well for them, costs too much, or just isn't doing the job, they can go out and hire their own accounting team, and they can put the accounting team out of business. The accounting team knows this, so by the way, they're really responsive. Marketing, operations, it doesn't matter, whatever your team is, maintenance, they're all profit centers, and they all pay each other to do business, and they all work together cooperatively. Not a single manager in the whole place. All right, so we've drunk from a fire hose today. Anybody got some things they might share on how this has worked for them? We got a few minutes here, and I think I had one person who is in a position to share, and others of you might want to as well. You just take a minute or two and see how this stuff has worked for you. Clayton, are you on? I think you're on.
Yeah, I'm on, Chuck. Thank you so much.
Yeah, so just tell people real quick what your company is, and just take a minute. We don't have a lot of time. Just take a minute and share how this stuff might have worked for you.
Sounds good. Yeah, we started our journey a couple of years ago. We're an accounting firm, and if you think of the types of hierarchical businesses that have always required a heroic genius sitting at the top orchestrating everything, I mean, that's this business, right? Yep. It's a partner-based business. The clients see the partners, the staff report to the partners. It's partner, partner, partner. And so we wanted to de-silo that, we call it, where we went to more of a competency-based approach, where we wrapped ourselves around our customers. And notice I don't call them clients. We wrapped ourselves around our customers for whatever they needed, and we just plugged in the expertise as needed. I intend to, by the way, David Marquet, nobody comes into this office without I intend to lined up on their way in. I mean, the results are, In the last 3 years, we've sort of doubled our revenue. In the last 14 months, we'll triple our staff. I spent about 6 weeks on my mountain bike last summer, and the last sort of remnants of our old school culture self-selected out earlier this year. And I had a big smile on my face when it happened, because it just presented a huge opportunity to backfill that with someone to come into our new culture. We had one person who was resisting heavily, and you talked about how self-selection happens. Maybe that's Alan Mullally's term for it. I really like that term, where the culture pushed that person out. And so we've had some really, really good successes.
Yeah.
And I think that the main thing that we do, that you have to do for distributed decision making, is provide context. So, you know, the context for, you talk about the people sitting on the soccer pitch, the context is ball in net, right? Without that context, everybody's standing around.
Yeah.
And so that context is, you need to give people the tools and the context, and we do that, and we focus on that through a lot
that's
of.
That's the value of vision, mission, and values and principles.
Yes.
True north.
Yeah, and so, you know, our values are helpful, responsive, valuable. You know, do that with our customers, and you can make the decision. I'll never come and question you on your decision.
Beautiful. Thank you. This just a great way to tie this up. And we got time for maybe one more. I'm sure there's people on here who have taken this path already and have seen results like some of these crazy results we put on the screen, and the ones that Clayton just mentioned. They doubled, they're going to triple. Anybody, you don't have to have things like that. You can just have a very anecdotal thing that's happened to you.
I could possibly give one. So we run our own business, Core Impact, bit of a plug, and we managed a team, still do, when we were full-time before we stepped out into our business full-time while we were employed. So it was majority part-time workers, a lot of 18 to 24-year-olds. So across the board, as you can imagine, usually it's high turnover. We pretty much adapted the cultural approach of give people responsibility and see what they do with it. A very small example was there, and a very, very small example on the scale of what Clayton said there, was we had a party area. So it was a hospitality leisure industry business. And we knew that we wanted to jazz up the party area for kids, young children. And we put it out to the team and just said, look, we want ideas. What do you think? And two of the team that we had no idea about were quite good artists. And they took a day or two, which we paid them for, to do up that area. And what happened off the back of that was the ownership and the trust that the rest of the team had in those two people, was that our party sales just went through the roof because everyone was so proud of it. That's just a small piece in the big puzzle of what we created, which actually became a theory. We now a model that we have created called Impact Success on how to create a culture. But it culminated in the bottom line, in the sense that for a 2-year period, we had 0 employee turnover with that age group of 18 to 24-year-olds. Wow. So it's something that we decided, you know what, we need to go big, and that's why we went full time. So this stuff is fantastic. Right up our alley. It's fantastic.
That's fantastic. Yeah. Wegmans groceries here in the U.S., the average transition or time that someone stays at a grocery in the U.S., well, that's the average time, but the turnover every year, we call it turnover here, retention is 35%. 35% of the people leave every year. In Wegmans, 3% every year for the last 30 years, because everybody gets a brain. Think about how that would save you some time and energy and money. When your retention is 10 times better than the competition. Well, we could go on, and that would be a lot of fun. We might want to have another one of these where we just have people share their inspiring stories with one another, because then you know who to connect with. But we don't have time for that today. I want to give you a couple things as we end here real quick. 3 things to do. One, of course, would be, let's do this. One of them would be to connect with one of these people. In Europe, US, rest of world, virtual, online, anybody like that, to meet with Sandy. And then we have our Got podcast. If you want any of that stuff, please connect with us that way. And Megan's going to put that in the chat box for you, so you don't have to panic because I just moved. And then if you want to buy any of these books, the one in the middle is the one we talked about today. The one on the left is a great place to start. That's the majority of the things we do in 3 to 5 Club come from that book on the left that help you get off the treadmill and build a business that makes money when you are not there. And then the last thing, I'd love to just have you, I know we're going to run over here a little bit and you don't have to stick around, but I would love for you for just a few people to share what we always end every meeting with what we call the BFO, Lightning flash of the obvious. It's sort of like, I could have had what's one thing? What's the next one thing you think you might be able to do as a result of being here today? What's one thing you can take away that would be practical? You can put it in the chat box, but I'd love to also have people just shout out. Don't tell stories, just real quick, 1 or 2 or 3 words. What's something you got out of this? Redefine leadership, Carlos says.
Empowering your employees more.
Empowering people. Yeah, get them to where they have the ability to use the power they already have. Get them engaged. To inspire, do, inspire, relate, Laurie says. Stop the top to bottom, move side to side. I intend to communicate and delegate. Confirmation that engaging and enabling and empowering people is the way forward. I love this. Choose to follow rather than force to. We didn't have time for that today, but basically managers don't have followers. Only leaders have followers because they can choose. Empowerment is key to growth. Let go of the control. Yeah. No need to give commands, get employees to say I intend to. Leader. Keep moving the ball, or moving toward the ball. Yep.
Sorry, I suppose people taking time out to realize that you do need to take time out of your business to hear a different view or to get an understanding of how businesses are reinventing themselves. And I mean, I just think it's testimony to everybody who's come on here today that we've taken time out to listen. I suppose my next question is the next step for everybody. Everybody's going to go back to work right now.
Yeah.
So what would you suggest to continue this momentum? Because the one thing I took from it, was as a leader, I don't need to know all the answers. I don't need to have all the answers. They're in the team.
No.
What would you suggest as kind of next step?
The first thing is for all of us to understand that the rugged individualist is dead. Long live the rugged individualist. So we're all taught that as business owners more than anybody is I need to be able to do this on my own. As soon as you print a business card, I've got this figured out. No, you don't. That was my attitude for the first 5 or 6 businesses. It took me a long time to figure out that was a bad idea. So I need to live in community. I desperately need other people to talk to. And as we developed 3 to 5 Club close to 12 years ago now, one of the things we said was the value of that or some other. I'm not selling you 3 to 5 Club. I am saying the first thing you need to do is get into community. Get out of your office and find other people who have what we call outside eyes, one of the 4 building blocks of a business, and get outside eyes on your business from people who have no dog in the hunt. We call it finding a place where you can say 3 magic words. Somebody knows the 3 magic words. What are they that we have for 3 to 5 Club?
I don't know.
I don't know. Yeah. Where do you go to say I don't know? If you say it to your clients, they start leaving. You say it to your staff, they start leaving. You say it to worst of all, if you say it to your spouse, then there's 2 of you not sleeping because they actually thought you knew what you were doing. Where do you go to say I don't know? You need a safe place. We all need that place to say, hey, I'm struggling with this week or this month. So find community. And 3 to 5 Club is a place you can do that. And we've got them online. We got them in Europe. We got them in the US. And it's been a savior for me because I am a recovering John Wayne rugged individualist. That's my background. So I've really had to relearn how to live in community. And I can't tell you how it shortens the learning curve. You make a lot fewer mistakes. It's a lot less expensive. There's no downside. Get in community. That'd be the first thing. Great question. Safe place with like-minded individuals. Absolutely. All right. Well, we've run over. And we could just keep going, and that's a good sign that we've done something right. Hopefully, I've created as many questions as I've solved today. So I'll just pass it back to Mr. Heenan to kind of close us out here.
Okay, well, Chuck, thanks a million. And through the forum, yes, you have caused more questions in my head than answers. So thanks for that. It's always great. What you do, it gets us to open up our minds, gets us to ask the better question. Challenge is we're asking the wrong question. So you get us to ask the better question. So thanks everybody for coming along. We will do this again. Give us a little bit of time. He's a busy man, but we will get him back on again and we'll do it. And make sure and send John or wherever area you are and do the Apex profile and touch base if you want more information. So
Yeah,
Chuck, thanks a million. Thank you.
And I'm real tired of this two-dimensional stuff, so I will be three-dimensional in Ireland just as quickly as they'll let us.
I'll have that pint waiting on you.
Sounds great.
Okay.
Thanks.
Chuck. Great
Thanks a
session.
million.
Thank you very
Thanks.
much.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, Chuck.
Thanks. Bye-bye. Bye.
Go lead.